When we think about oil, we often imagine pipelines, drilling rigs, and corporate boardrooms. But what if oil is also deeply connected to our most intimate lives, our homes, our families, and our bodies? Today, we will discuss how feminist critics analyze oil literature using two novels as case studies. Nawal El Saadawi's Love in the Kingdom of Oil, set in a Gulf petro state, and Laura Restrepo's The Dark Bride, set in Colombia. Both the novels reveal something important. Oil imperialism and gender oppression are not separate issues but deeply connected. Feminist critic Sheena Wilson introduced the term critical petro intersectionality to help us understand how race, class, and gender inequalities are not just side effects of oil culture, they are actively used to maintain power. For example, Western media often uses women's rights as a justification for military intervention in oil rich countries, while ignoring the real struggles of women in those regions. This rhetorical strategy makes female bodies into symbols of political conflict rather than recognizing women as actual political actors with their own agency. Wilson's framework reminds us that when we study oil, we must pay attention to how different forms of oppression work together. A woman in Saudi Arabia and a woman in Colombia experience oil imperialism differently, but both face systems where their labor bodies and lives are shaped by global energy politics. To understand these novels, we need a concept called social reproduction. This theory examines all the unpaid work that keeps society running: cooking, cleaning, childcare, sex work, and subsistence farming. This work is mostly done by women and is essential for capitalism to function. Without it, there would be no workers to drill oil, no families to consume oil products, and no one to care for the next generation of laborers. When an oil worker goes to the rig, someone had to feed him, clean his clothes, and raise him. That work is invisible but absolutely necessary. In the 1970s, when oil prices rose dramatically, it was women's unpaid labor that absorbed much of the economic shock. The cost of reproduction was shifted onto women's shoulders, making their work even more invisible and unvalued. Huber's book Lifeblood shows how oil was marketed in 1950s America as a helper for housewives. Advertisements promised that petroleum based products would free women from drudgery. Plastic appliances, synthetic fabrics, and cosmetics would make life easier. But this good life was only available to a certain kind of white, middle class, suburban woman. Meanwhile, women in oil producing countries experienced oil very differently. Sadhavi's novel flips this narrative entirely. In Love in the Kingdom of Oil, the wife of oil is not a consumer enjoying modern conveniences, but a prisoner carrying heavy jars of oil on her head. The oil that supposedly liberates women in Western advertising becomes a tool of oppression. The protagonist is forced to perform endless chores, beaten when she resists, and treated like a beast of burden. Her work directly serves an American oil company, even though she receives no wages. This reversal shows us that oil's impact on gender relations depends on where you are in the global system. In the global north, oil might seem like a liberator. In the global south, it often appears as an oppressor. Sadhavi's novel demonstrates how patriarchy and oil capitalism work together. The protagonist faces multiple husbands: her biological father, her boss, her legal husband, and the policeman, all representing different institutions that control her. The patriarchal religion of the state is used to justify her exploitation, but the real source of her oppression is economic. As she says, what was the relation of gods with money? The answer is very clear. Religion is mobilized to keep women in their place so that the oil company can keep extracting wealth. The novel also refuses the simplistic clash of civilizations argument that blames Islam for women's oppression. Instead, Sadhavi shows that Western imperialism and local patriarchy are partners in exploitation. The problem is not Islam, but a specific form of capitalist patriarchy that benefits from oil wealth while keeping women subjugated. Restrepo's novel offers a different perspective, focusing on the relationship between oil workers and sex workers in the early 20th century Colombia. We see what Daggett calls petromasculinity, a form of manhood tied to fossil fuel extraction. Oil workers in the novel are proud of their strength, their wages, and their ability to purchase sex. Their masculinity is literally built on oil. But this masculinity is fragile. The workers are exploited by the oil company, given barely edible food, and denied the right to form families. Their sense of pride turns to rage during the famous rice strike of 1948, when they revolt against their working conditions. In this moment, the sex workers join them, creating a powerful alliance based on shared exploitation. The novel shows how the oil company eventually uses patriarchy to control its workforce. After the strike, the company realizes that unmarried men with nothing to lose are dangerous. So it begins promoting marriage and home ownership, creating a system where men with wives and children will think twice before risking their jobs. This is a cynical use of family values to prevent labor organizing, a perfect example of how patriarchy serves capital. Both novels depict women resisting, though in different ways. In Sadhuvi's book, the protagonist tries to organize the other women carrying jars. They sing and dance together, momentarily feeling solidarity, though their resistance is quickly suppressed. The novel's circular structure, always returning to the beginning, suggests that individual resistance is not enough. Collective action is necessary. Restrepo's novel is more hopeful. The women successfully shut down a clinic that was exploiting them and later joined the oil workers' strike, demanding not just better wages but also basic infrastructure like water and sewage. These demands for clean water and decent housing or social reproduction struggles fights over the conditions that make life possible. The novel also gives us a glimpse of alternative futures. During the strike, the characters experience communal eroticism, a sense of collective love and solidarity that opens up possibilities for a different world. Even though the strike is eventually crushed, this feeling of hope is worth remembering. Reading these two novels together reveals several important lessons. First, oil is not just resource but a social relationship. It structures everything from household chores to sexual politics. Second, women's work, whether carrying jars of oil or working as prostitutes, is essential to the oil economy, even though it remains invisible. Third, patriarchy and oil imperialism are mutually reinforcing systems. Fourth, resistance is possible, especially when struggles over social reproduction fuse with labor struggles. These novels also challenge the assumption that oil is invisible in the global south. For people living in extraction zones, oil is brutally visible. In the black rain, the poisoned water, the destroyed landscapes, and transformed social relations. The question is not whether oil is hidden, but whether we are willing to see its full impact. Feminist petrofiction teaches us that energy transitions are not just about technology, but about power. Any just transition away from fossil fuels must address the gendered inequalities built into our current energy system. These novels remind us that women are not just victims of oil imperialism, but also agents of change, fighting for dignity, wages, and control over their own lives. As we imagine a post oil future, we need to center these struggles. What kind of world do we want to create? One where women's work is valued, where communities have control over their resources, and where solidarity across gender, race, and class lines is possible. The literature of oil shows us that the horrors of our current system and the seeds of its transformation.